Right. So let's get into your culinary journey. So you're growing up. What did you get before you? I know you got your master's in culinary, but what did you think you wanted to go into? What did you study
Mm.
before you walked into a restaurant kitchen?
Yeah, so I went 2 years university for political science in Rome,
Okay.
and then sex, drugs, and R&B tossed me off the curb.
Okay. I don't know if we want to go into that. If you want to, feel free.
And I was young, I was curious, but my mother had a wish and desire for me to become a lawyer. She
Okay.
had her aunt was working at the UNICEF in Geneva, married to a white American man that was working at the UNICEF, and they had this very beautiful, lavish lifestyle,
Mhm.
living in Geneva, working for the United Nations. And my mother aspired for me to become that,
Okay.
primarily for her own sense of a pride and joy. And I tried, but it wasn't really for me. And
Mhm.
I feel there are too many undiagnosed things within me that doesn't allow me to stay still in a cubicle from 9 to 5. I think within my spirit as a nomad, I feel constantly the element of movement, both physically but in the same mentally.
Okay.
And my journey went from thinking to become a lawyer and to become a politician or a diplomat to eventually finding comfort in cooking. So my first training program was in Toronto in 1996 at a YMCA.
Okay.
Then a year later, I went and worked for an Italian restaurant, and then I worked for 4 years for a non-for-profit as a sous chef slash kitchen manager, and that's what really shaped my principles, my ideologies as a chef, and reflecting on food from lenses of social justice. I didn't have the language, but the restaurant was a training program for youth at risk, and I could identify myself with those youth at risk because I was young, I was Black, fairly new into the country, and having the need to find a meaningful employment. So
Okay.
the restaurant, because we had many kids who were like disadvantaged from
But you
different.
could have went anywhere, right? You could have went to retail. You could have went into auto or something, but you went into food. Was that purpose or was it just I need a job or I'm just looking,
You know,
when you started at the YMCA?
yeah, no. So when I came in 94 in Toronto, it took me about a year and a half to find myself. I
Okay.
didn't really have a purpose. I was kind of like lost in the transition. I'm not Italian. I'm not really Somali. I'm not an African American, where I am. So this kind of a lack of identity didn't really have the drive to find a job because I was in a comfortable place with a lot of relatives. Most of
Okay.
my mother's sisters and brothers live right here. So I didn't
Okay.
have to work. I didn't have any financial obligation to anybody. And one of my close friends said to me, "Hey, you don't have anything to do. You seem a bit lost. Why don't you come with me at this training program in cooking?" I was like, "Okay." And I went in this kitchen and I was hooked from the
Mm,
first day that I put my foot inside there. I felt a real sense of a belonging, maybe because of like a bunch of pirates in this kitchen, screaming and shouting. I was like, oh my gosh, I can deal with this.
wow.
But I feel
Before you continue, I want to ask this question, if you don't mind. Did you ever talk to any of your family members or anyone about how you were feeling in regards to your identity, your all of that? Did you ever have those conversations?
no, no, my many of my family they actually there is a term in Somalia. It's called galmado. Galmado, it means like a white Christian.
Mm,
It's basically kind of like I say, like you're a foreigner, although you are one of us. Because although I am Somali and I can speak part a little bit the language, I I didn't grow up with the same cultural nuance that Somali people have. And
mhm.
therefore, because I grew up in a very European place, when I'm around Somali people, neither of us can connect truly. I
Mm,
mean,
mm,
now, yes, but before we experience our own cultural and ethnic background, but we are not the same
okay.
because the way how I think, the way how I speak, the way I eat my food at that time. So a lot of my Somali peers and family, they used to always make fun of me because it's like, why you Why are you using a fork inside your own home? Why are you lifting the fork like this? Why? And I'm like, what do you mean? You lift the forks? Like, no, you pick up the food with your hands and then you connect with the food, And they said to me, it's very counterintuitive to put a metal inside your mouth.
Oh, wow.
It's not natural to you and to your being. So slowly by slowly I was giving those cultural nutrients, and somebody was able to articulate the profound reasonings behind why we do what we do.
Mhm.
So I slowly started to remove the shame, the stigma, and the taboo,
Right.
because those cultural nutrients enhance my being.
Wow. That's powerful. That is very powerful. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so we're going back. I'm sorry. So we're in the YMCA, you stepped into the kitchen, you're home. Something in you just comes alive.
Yes, it becomes alive, and I thrived in that space. I felt really wanting to be there, so
Mhm.
I would be like the first guy to go in the kitchen, the last guy to leave. I felt that I could make change, and then that was also the time that a lot of the Food Network
Okay.
shows were coming out, and I
Mhm.
felt that I was going to become this celebrity chef. I felt like I was honing my skills.
Mhm.
And then, people have seen my hunger and my appetite and my desire to succeed in the industry. And then my chef had paid for my sponsor my schooling.
Okay.
So I went to one of the largest culinary program in Toronto. I went to Jordan College, and I got a diploma in culinary management. I did a 2-year program, and then I worked for a few boutique high-end hotels, some very renowned restaurants in Toronto, and and that's how my path and my career started. But because my own self-discovery, you
Mhm.
know, there were a lot of the things that I was not accepting. If you look at my track record of restaurants that I had left, maybe a resume might say 6 hours. He was able to finish dinner service and he left and never showed up again, because in the restaurant industry is extremely oppressive.
Yeah, and toxic. And I was going to say, you went from starting to discover yourself identity in the world to now you're in another world where you've got another beast to battle with, right? Toxic, being toxic in the kitchen, racism, misogyny, nepotism,
Homophobia.
all of that. Now now you've got this added to the mix, right?
Yeah, and because the culinary industry is actually built like the army. So this gentleman called Auguste Escoffier designed this brigade system, and even the language that we still use inside the kitchen is very much based like in the army. So you're using terminology like order, fire, pick up, which is like very army based, and it's like there is a general, which is the executive chef, and then it goes down to the minions, and that structure of a power, and the constant desire to make the guest experience more meaningful, more beautiful.
Mhm.
Somebody else has to pay for those for that dining experience, and most of the time will be cooks, will work 10, 12, 14 hours, very little breaks. If we'll eat on milk crates. If we eat whatever thing that we can get around. Meantime, the rest of the dining experience for all the guests were beautiful. I worked in a lot of places that the only thing that I can offer you for free is pasta. Otherwise, you have to pay 20%. So imagine when you're making very little money, and
Mhm.
then 20% of something that might cost $28 to $32.
Right.
So
So welcome to capitalism now, huh?
absolutely welcome.
Welcome to capitalism.
Sometimes
Wow.
be squeezed. Yes.
So as you're going through working at these amazing restaurants, there's a yearning to do your own thing or just to really have something where who you are is 1000%, right? And so share a little bit about My Little Dumplings. I know that was one of your first ventures.
Yeah, so I experimented with a little bit of a catering at farmers markets, and the first catering company actually that I had, it was called Nomads, and again, trying to tie my own cultural identity and my own heritage. But at farmers market, predominantly white people, very affluent, they will go to the farmers market to food vendors that they were offering the same item over and over and over. But
Mhm.
because I wasn't really able to find my own food or food that really spoke to me in a consistent way, because I didn't grow up eating Somali food, but I just didn't want to cook Italian food. I
Right.
don't come from a owning soul food, because soul food, it's something inherently owned by African American people, which we're
Mhm.
going to talk about other culture vulture who use the soul food.
Mhm.
And I didn't really understand what Canadian or Canadiana cuisine is.
Okay.
So I was doing this combination of seasoning, spices. I will do, parsnip bread with elk and maybe homemade cheese sauce to make like a take on a steak sandwich by using like local Canadian ingredients.
Mhm.
So my field of interest has always been this intersectionality between local and diversity,
Okay.
you
I like
know.
that. Mhm.
So my journey at farmers market, the customers like, hey, last week you had an anjera, this beautiful Ethiopian sourdough crepe, and then you had like braised kale and chicken with harissa. I came back for that, and I'm like, no, today I have something different. I really love that one. I was like, and then I realized that I was losing a bit of a customers because they were hoping to find the same thing. But there is also an element of like exoticizing our own food, and people want me to sell food that is like quote unquote black. But
Mhm.
because my essence and identity is not only based on my skin color, so I felt that I needed and wanted to offer more, primarily coming from a place of wanting to be accepted. When I have to really think deeply, I was cooking food to assert myself within the food system, but at the same time seeking to be validated and accepted
People
by
pleasing. People pleasing.
primarily to have like a sense of acceptance on our food, you know
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. So then I spoke with a few friends of mine. I was like, listen, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. You grew
Mhm.
up in Italy, you're really good at making pasta, you have this crazy concoction and combinations. Why don't you use the food that is actually speaks to everybody? So that's the birth of my little dumplings, which was the first culturally diverse, all handmade organic dumplings at farmers market.
Mm.
um, and the term my little dumplings, it comes from my children. So I had 3 children, and so there was a homage to them. So the analogy basically falls that the skin that holds the dumpling
Mhm.
might vary, but what's really important and more delicious and more meaningful, it's actually the inside.
I love that. I love that.
Most
You know,
matters.
there's this balance that you have to do between doing what I want to do. No, I don't want to do that dish every week. I want to try new things. But then, like you said, the customer's like, well, no, I want that. And I want it again and again and again and again. So, how do you get that balance? Or do you just say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, like it or leave it?
A lot of people will lie to you, but chef, it comes from a very narcissistic place. I didn't get into the industry just to please everybody. It comes from like what I want.
Hmm.
Customers, they're gonna enjoy what I want. So it comes from a very personal desire, just like an artist. If you say to an artist, I want you to paint this and I want you to put this kind of a shade and it should look like this, the artist can commission work for you, but there is no soul inside.
Hmm.
If you give me an opportunity to express my creativity, my understanding of food, allow me to, you know, give you something that really speaks about my own experience. And then we can talk about it. There's also an element of like there's an element of a vulnerability about chef. I feel like many other people who are artists or they expose their art to somebody else, we are kind of like ready to take a criticism. We don't take it really well, but we are ready to take a criticism. So that element of a vulnerability in these chefs, that it can be like very tenacious, they can be very assertive, but at the same time being able to put themselves out there waiting for somebody else to give them a judgment around it without they might not have like a full understanding. And the biggest thing is also for us racialized people. You see, for us Black people, we have to spend a lot of time and money in educating consumers,
Right.
even within our own community. It's easier because the Europeans have, through their white supremacy, they were able to force feed in other communities their own food. And we have been told by them, and eventually also from our parents and grandparents, that that's the epitome of all
Mhm.
cooking. So this subjugation and acceptance on white supremacy, it's still lingering in every aspect of our life. But
Absolutely.
for us in the food system, the element of um, self-identity, we always had this act of resistance and resilience. But slowly by slowly, we had lost some of it. And now there is this new Black love insurgency that everybody's like, we are free to be able to support ourselves. We are free to be able to showcase our own food. We can invest in our own community.
Absolutely.
Liberating.
Sovereignty all the way, right?
Sovereignty all the way.
Wow. When did you, as you look at your life now and you're telling your story, how long ago would you say, you know what, you've truly found the peace that you were not knowingly looking for?
I felt peace for the first time when I hosted a supper club called the Nomadic Supper.
Mhm.
It was the first time that I attempted to really do a meal that is a homage to my own community, but also reflect, multi-ethnic Africans by using local Canadian ingredients. So there was a big article on one of the largest newspaper here in Toronto around this meal
Mhm.
that it felt very. I want to use a pseudo term like very Moorish Marrakesh-like,
Mhm.
just to describe the feeling of going in a room that is full of carpets and its pillows. So that was my old dumpling kitchen that we converted into a dining room that it felt like being at my grandparents' home. So
Nice.
you will come from the back of the restaurant, you'll go through the kitchen, you'll remove your shoes, and then you will break bread with strangers. So the private supper was only for 20 people. And the notion of sitting down on the floor and consuming communally food with people and having to use their hands. This was the moment of a true liberation because this act of resistance by dining in a way that is like not only culturally our, but really helps people to be grounded.
I
And
was gonna
this,
say, it would seem like there's a release there, you know, that I don't have to be this person in a suit, buttoned up, whatever, whatever, and I can just truly let my hair down or whatever, you know, at these events.
yeah, to be comfortable in my own skin and fully accepting and loving my own identity, I could speak with a conviction. And but my food is delicious as well. Like
Let's not get that twisted, huh?
I don't want to brag about it. We can talk about this whole ideology and principles and philosophy, but food is dope, and I cook pretty delicious food, and the
Awesome.
combination of food that I do is not very linear
Mhm.
because I do not have a uh, 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 I haven't been taught the roots of Somali food. And
Okay.
as you know, as we know, a continent with 54 countries, it's very difficult to be the expert in anything.
Right.
So my love is always been botanical first.
Mhm.
So I think about plants because every country have a different type of a plants and their geographical area force them to consume what's immediately in front of them. So for me, it's not the recipe per se, it's actually the botany, the plant and the surrounding. Somali people, we don't have a lot of a vegetation when it comes about farming, but
Okay.
we have what we do in the nomadism, it's the element of a sustainability. So we only take with us what our camel can carry, and we only harvest or forage the things that are around our environment.
Gotcha.
Versus many other countries where the landscape is a bit different and they are able to grow food So for me, it's always like understanding where geographical our community are, and therefore making interpretations on particular dishes. I don't like to believe in the word authenticity,
Okay.
because authenticity has a time and place. Food is very much like a river, and it's constantly changing through the stream.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
therefore, something that is authentic 200 years ago to that community within the geographical area, because of many other factors, that food has changed and the ingredients have changed. So therefore, food cannot be authentic. It can be authentic to one's experience, but it
Mhm.
cannot be authentic to define a whole nation.
Oh, wow. Okay.